By the time Victor Langford
Thank you.
noticed
Have a
the
good night.
waitress standing beside his table, he had already decided she did not matter.
Good evening, madam.
That was
evening,
his
thank
first
you.
mistake. His second was assuming the contract in her hand belonged to someone else. The dinner was being held in the private dining room of the Meridian House, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Boston. 12 guests,
Good
2
afternoon.
investors,
Welcome to the
3
dining room.
lawyers,
Enjoy your
1
meal.
private equity team, a regional bank president, and Victor
Enjoy your
Langford, 54, founder of Langford Capital, a man who had spent 28 years turning failing companies into profitable assets and reminding everyone in the room that he had done it. Victor liked environments
Your
where
car is ready
hierarchy
for you,
was
Mr.
visible.
Sterling.
He liked expensive
Perfect.
rooms,
And do I have a
private
reservation?
elevators,
Yes,
reserved
everything is
tables,
set for 8 o'clock.
people who stood when he arrived, people who already knew his name.
We
The
cannot afford
Meridian
any
House
mistakes
gave
on
him all
this.
of that.
If this
The
leaks
room
out,
had dark
Hale and
walnut
Associates
walls,
is finished.
soft amber lighting, white linen, crystal water glasses, and a view
I didn't
across the
come here to
harbor.
negotiate.
The staff moved quietly.
Everything
That
we
included the
built
waitress.
is on the line.
Her name was Claire Bennett.
You need to decide
46
whose
years
side you are
old,
on.
medium height, slim, chestnut brown hair pinned into a low bun, hazel green eyes, white shirt, black vest, black trousers, black apron, no jewelry except a simple gold band on a chain beneath her collar. She carried a leather wine folder and a small black order pad. To Victor, she was background. He barely looked at her when she poured water. He did not notice the way the general manager, Andrew Miles, glanced at her before answering certain questions. He did not notice that the executive chef came out of the kitchen twice and spoke to her quietly. He did not notice the restaurant's finance director enter through the service corridor and place a sealed document folder in the staff office. And he certainly did not notice that Claire had been watching him for 3 months, not personally, professionally. The Meridian House was one of 22 restaurants owned by Donovan Hospitality Group. Victor wanted to buy control of the group, not the restaurants individually. The operating company, the leases, the brand rights, the catering division, the private events business, the management contracts, the whole platform. His offer valued Donovan Hospitality at $180 million. On paper, it was generous. In reality, it was designed to give Langford Capital control without immediately paying for all of it. Victor's team had spent 6 months negotiating with Donovan's executive leadership. They believed the deal was almost finished. They believed the board was tired. They believed the founders were gone. They believed the remaining shareholders wanted liquidity. And they believed the one person with enough voting power to stop the transaction had already signed away her influence years earlier. That belief came from a summary prepared by Donovan's former chief financial officer. The summary was wrong. Claire Bennett knew that, because her legal name was Claire Donovan, and she owned 51% of the company's voting rights through the Donovan Family Stewardship Trust. Victor did not know. Most employees did not know. Claire had not used the Donovan name publicly in years. After her husband Daniel died, she stepped away from the board. Not from ownership, from visibility. Daniel Donovan had started the first Meridian House with 12 tables, a borrowed refrigeration unit, and a menu written by hand. Claire had built the numbers. He built the kitchen. She negotiated the first lease. He sold the first private dinner. She built payroll. He built culture. Together they expanded. Then Daniel died from pancreatic cancer at 53. The company continued. Claire did not. Not for a while. After his death, she transferred day-to-day authority to professional management, but she kept the voting trust. Daniel had insisted on it. "If we ever get big enough for people to stop seeing the waiter," he once told her, "we're already too big." Claire had laughed. He had not. That sentence stayed with her. 3 years after his death, Claire began working occasional shifts inside her own restaurants under her maiden name. At first, only a few executives knew. Then fewer. She wanted to see what the company looked like from the floor. Not from the boardroom, not from dashboards, not from quarterly reports. From the floor, she wanted to know who got breaks, who got blamed, who got promoted, which managers touched shoulders when they spoke to staff, which customers were protected from consequences because they spent money, which policies existed only in training manuals. She had learned more in 14 months carrying plates than she had in 5 years of board reports. She also learned that Langford Capital's people behaved very differently when they thought no owner was in the room. Then came the financial terms. Langford Capital proposed a management incentive plan that sounded generous. 8% equity pool, performance bonuses, retention grants. Claire read the schedule. Half the restaurant-level managers would lose existing profit participation once the acquisition closed. Hourly staff benefits would remain subject to optimization. The employee hardship fund would become discretionary. The training academy Daniel created would be folded into operational efficiency review. And a clause buried in the facilities schedule gave the buyer the right to close or sell underperforming locations after 12 months. 6 restaurants fit that definition. 3 were in lower-income neighborhoods, 2 were the company's oldest. 1 was the restaurant where Daniel had proposed to Claire. The board had been told the closures were hypothetical. Claire did not believe in hypothetical rights when lawyers took time to draft them. She asked Donovan's general counsel to review the original shareholder agreements. Then the trust documents. Then the 2014 recapitalization. Then the amendment signed 2 years before Daniel's death. That was where they found it. Section 14.7, the Founder's Stewardship Covenant. Any transaction causing a change of control, sale of the Donovan brand, termination of the employee profit-sharing program, or closure of more than 15% of operating locations within 24 months required written consent from the holder of the stewardship voting interest. That holder was the Donovan Family Stewardship Trust. Trustee and controlling beneficiary, Claire Donovan. The provision had never been removed. It could not be removed without her approval, and she had never approved it. That should have ended the acquisition. Claire decided not to end it immediately. She wanted to know whether Langford Capital would negotiate differently if they thought resistance was impossible, so she stayed quiet. The dinner at Meridian House was scheduled as the final commercial review before signing. Victor believed the board would approve the next morning. He arrived at 7:12. His assistant arrived first. His legal counsel, Martin Hale, sat to his right. Across from him were Donovan CEO Grant Mercer and 2 directors. Claire served the table. For the first 40 minutes, the conversation was polite. Then Victor started speaking as if the deal were already his. "The first 100 days are about discipline," he said. Grant Mercer nodded. "We've discussed continuity. Continuity is useful until it becomes nostalgia." Claire placed a plate beside him. Victor did not look up. He continued. "Restaurants become sentimental about history. History is expensive." One director shifted slightly. Victor smiled. "Brands survive change. Weak operators don't." Claire moved to the next guest. Grant said, "The founders built a very employee-centered culture." "I know." Victor cut into his steak. "That's one of the problems." Claire stopped for half a second. No one noticed except Andrew Miles near the service door. Victor continued. "You've got restaurant managers making decisions that should be centralized. Training costs are too high. Benefit participation is too broad. Several sites are protected by emotion." Grant said. "Protected? Let's not pretend." Victor looked around the table. Cambridge East loses money. Dorchester barely contributes. The old Portland location has no strategic value. Claire set down another plate. "Portland, Daniel's first expansion outside Massachusetts." Victor continued. "You don't acquire a company to preserve every memory attached to it." Claire stepped away. The next course arrived. At 8:23, Martin Hale opened the latest draft of the purchase agreement. Remaining items are employment continuity, transition services, and the seller representation schedule. Victor waved one hand. "None of that should hold us up." Grant Mercer said, "There is also governance." Victor smiled. "What governance?" "The board requested confirmation regarding historical founder rights." Martin looked at him. "We received the capitalization table." "Yes." "And the voting schedule." "Yes." "Then there is nothing unusual." Claire poured wine for the bank president. Grant said, "Counsel is still reviewing legacy documents." Victor leaned back. "You've been reviewing documents for 6 months. Some older provisions are not reflected in the summary materials." Victor looked irritated. "Then your former CFO failed." Claire looked down. The former CFO had done more than fail. He had assumed Claire's absence meant irrelevance. Victor turned toward her. "Cabernet." Claire nodded. "Of course." She reached for the bottle. Victor held his glass without looking at her. Then someone at the end of the table asked about labor strategy. Victor answered immediately. "We'll simplify." Claire poured. "Hourly staffing is too high. Scheduling is inefficient. The company behaves as if employee preference is a contractual obligation. One director said, "Retention is one of our strongest operating advantages." Victor shrugged. "Everyone says that until payroll gets modeled properly." Claire finished pouring. Victor lifted the glass. "This is warm." She looked at the bottle. "It's at 60 degrees. I said it's warm. I can bring another bottle." Victor stared at her for the first time. Really stared. "What's your name?" "Claire." "Claire, when a guest tells you the wine is warm, the correct answer is not a temperature." The table went quiet. Claire nodded once. "What would you prefer?" "I would prefer you listen." Andrew Miles took one step forward. Claire glanced at him. He stopped. Victor continued. "You're just a waitress. You don't need to defend the cellar." There it was. Simple. Casual. Not shouted. That made it worse. One of the directors looked down. Grant Mercer's face tightened. Claire held Victor's gaze. Then she said, "Of course." She removed the bottle. Victor turned back to Martin. "Where were we?" Martin cleared his throat. "Transition rights." Claire walked into the service corridor. Andrew followed. "I can remove him." "No." "Claire." "No. He spoke to you like—" "I heard him." Andrew lowered his voice. "You don't have to stand there." "Yes, I do." "Why?" She looked through the service window toward the private room. "Because he still thinks the contract is his." Andrew stared at her. Claire handed him the wine bottle. "It's not warm." "I know. Bring him another one anyway." Then she went to the staff office. The sealed document folder was on the desk. She opened it. Inside were 3 copies of the Founder's Stewardship Covenant, a certificate from the trust administrator, the original 2014 shareholder amendment, and a short legal opinion from Donovan's outside counsel. Claire read the opinion again. Section 14.7 remains valid, binding, and enforceable. The proposed transaction cannot close without written consent of the stewardship voting interest. Claire closed the folder. Then she returned to the dining room. Victor was talking about closures. 6 is the obvious number, he said. Grant Mercer looked uncomfortable. 6? Eventually. You told the board 3 were under review. Victor shrugged. Boards don't need operating detail before closing. Claire stopped behind him. Martin Hale looked up. Unlike Victor, he noticed the folder. His expression changed. "Excuse me," Claire said. Victor turned halfway. "Yes?" She placed the folder beside Grant Mercer. Victor frowned. "We're in the middle of something." Claire looked at Grant. "Have you reached section 14.7? Grant said nothing. Martin Hale went still. Victor looked between them. "What section?" Claire opened the folder. "The Founder's Stewardship Covenant." Victor's face showed irritation before concern. "Who asked you to bring that?" "I did." He looked at her. "You?" "Yes." Martin Hale stood slightly. "Ms. Bennett, may I see that?" Claire handed him the document. He read the first page, then the signature block, then the trust certificate. His expression became very different, Victor noticed. "What?" Martin did not answer immediately. Victor's voice sharpened. "Martin." Martin looked at Claire. "Are you Claire Donovan?" The room stopped. Grant Mercer closed his eyes. One director exhaled slowly. Victor stared at her. Claire removed her black apron. She folded it once, placed it on the empty service table. "Yes." Victor looked at Grant. "What is this?" Grant answered carefully. "Claire is Daniel Donovan's widow." "I know who Daniel Donovan was." "No." Grant looked at him. "You know who he was." Victor's eyes returned to Claire. Claire sat in the empty chair at the end of the table. For the first time that evening, Victor stared. "You work here?" "Yes." "As a waitress?" "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because people speak more honestly around waitresses." No one moved. Claire looked at Martin. "Read the operative language." Martin hesitated. Victor said, "Don't." Claire looked at him. "Why not?" Victor's face hardened. "Because whatever theater this is, we have a signed letter of intent and a negotiated purchase agreement. Neither closes the transaction. The board approves it. Not this one." Martin looked at Victor. "She's right." Victor turned slowly. "What?" Martin placed the document flat. Section 14.7 creates a separate consent right. "For what?" "Change of control, brand transfer, employee profit-sharing termination." Victor stared. Martin continued. "Enclosures above a 15% threshold within 24 months. Silence. Victor looked at Claire. "You own what?" 51% of the stewardship voting interest. That's not on the cap table." It's not economic equity. Martin nodded. It's voting control over specified reserved matters. Victor's face tightened. Why was this not disclosed? Grant said, it was in the data room. Victor turned on him. No, it wasn't. Claire said, Legacy Governance Folder. Document 14G. Martin looked down. He knew the folder. Victor saw it. You saw this. Martin answered carefully. I saw a reference to founder reserved rights. We requested a summary. And the summary said they were historical. Claire looked at him. Historical is not terminated. Martin said nothing. Victor turned to Claire. So this whole dinner was a setup? No. You served us. Yes. You listened to private deal discussions. In my restaurant. Victor laughed once. Your restaurant. Partly. Don't play games. Claire's expression stayed calm. I'm not. Victor leaned forward. You let us spend 6 months and millions of dollars negotiating a transaction you could veto in one sentence. Yes. Why? Because I wanted to know what you would do if you thought no one could stop you. That landed. Victor looked around the table. Claire continued. You told the board you were considering 3 closures. Victor said nothing. You just said 6. Operational assumptions change. You told management benefits would be protected. They are subject to review. You told the board the training academy was core. It is. Your schedule says it can be eliminated after 12 months. Victor looked at Martin. Martin looked away. Claire opened another document. You also represented that restaurant-level profit participation would be maintained for 24 months. Victor said. Maintained in aggregate. No. Claire slid the page toward him. That is not what you told the board. Victor did not touch it. Grant Mercer looked at the document, then at Victor. What is this? Claire answered. Internal labor model from Langford Capital. Victor's eyes sharpened. How did you get that? It was included in the lender diligence package. The bank president at the table shifted. Claire looked at him. With your permission? He nodded slowly. Victor turned toward him. You gave her lender materials? The bank president said. Donovan's controlling consent holder was entitled to review transaction documents. Victor laughed again. Controlling consent holder. Claire looked at him. That phrase seems to bother you. What bothers me is being ambushed by a waitress with legal paperwork. Claire's eyes did not move. You're still doing it. Victor stopped. What? Waitress. The room went quiet. Claire leaned back. You keep saying it as if the job reduces the person. Victor said nothing. My husband washed dishes for 18 months before he opened the first Meridian house. Claire looked around the table. I served tables for 6 years. She looked back at Victor. There is nothing small about the work. Victor's jaw tightened. This is sentimental nonsense. No. Claire tapped the contract. This is governance. Martin Hale closed the agreement. That was the moment Victor understood. Not emotionally. Legally. The deal was dead unless Claire signed. He changed strategy immediately. That was what he was good at. Fine. His voice softened. Let's reset. Claire waited. We can address closures. How many? None for 24 months. Benefits? Protected. Profit participation? Protected. Training academy? Protected. Claire looked at him. Why? Victor frowned. Why what? Why are those commitments acceptable now? Because transactions involve compromise. No. She shook her head. They're acceptable now because you need my signature. Victor's face hardened again. Yes. At least that was honest. Claire nodded. Good. Victor leaned forward. Then tell me what you want. Claire looked at the folded apron, then at the contract. I wanted to know whether I could trust you with Daniel's company. Victor corrected her. With the shareholders' company. Claire almost smiled. There's the lawyer's answer. I'm not a lawyer. No. She looked at Martin. He is. Martin said nothing. Claire continued. And the answer is no. Victor stared at her. You're rejecting the offer? Yes. $180 million. Yes. Because you didn't like my tone with staff. No. Victor spread his hands. Then explain it. Claire opened the purchase agreement. Section 6.4 permits benefit restructuring. Another page. Schedule 9.2 allows 6 location dispositions based on post-close margin performance. Another. Your management plan removes local profit participation. Another. Your integration memo treats training as discretionary. Victor said, all negotiable. They were negotiable before tonight. They still are. You negotiated them when you thought I had no leverage. Silence. Claire closed the contract. That tells me what the final terms would become once employees had none. Grant Mercer looked down. He had supported the transaction. Now even he looked uncomfortable. Victor stood. This is irrational. Claire remained seated. No. You are sacrificing enormous shareholder value. The economic shareholders can sell if they want under another structure. You are blocking them. I am exercising a right they agreed to. Victor looked toward the directors. You're going to allow this? One director said, we did sign the covenant. The other added, and she is correct about the reserved matters. Victor looked at Grant. Grant exhaled. We need to adjourn. No. Victor pointed at Claire. You let an employee impersonate a powerless person to manipulate negotiations. Claire stood. I impersonated no one. You hid your identity. Yes. That is manipulation. No. She folded her hands. You treated me exactly the way you chose to treat me. Victor stared at her. Claire continued. I didn't ask you to insult a server. I said you were a waitress. You said just. He said nothing. That word did the work. The bank president closed his notebook. Martin began gathering papers. Victor saw the room leaving him. That was new. He turned toward Martin. Call the investment committee. Martin did not move. Now. Victor. What? We have another issue. Victor's face changed. What issue? Martin opened the lender diligence memo. Representations. Claire said nothing. Martin continued. Langford certified there were no material undisclosed changes to the integration plan after final lender review. Victor stared. So? The 6-location closure model is dated 3 days after that certification. The bank president looked up. Victor said, it was an internal scenario. Martin replied, then it should have been labeled scenario analysis. It was. No. Martin tapped the page. It says base case. The room went silent again. The bank president asked for the document. Martin handed it over. Victor looked at Claire. You planned this. No. You knew. I knew the documents contradicted each other. You were waiting to use it. I was waiting to see whether you would correct it. Victor laughed. This is absurd. The bank president stood. No. Victor turned. The man continued. This is diligence. That sentence ended the dinner. Not formally. No one announced it, but chairs moved. Folders closed. Phones came out. The acquisition did not collapse that night. Real transactions rarely die in one dramatic room. They die through emails, calls, committees, revised risk memos, counsel letters, and people refusing to sign. The next morning, Langford Capital's investment committee delayed approval. The lender suspended its commitment pending clarification. Donovan's board formed a special committee. Claire submitted a written notice withholding stewardship consent. That made closing impossible. Victor called her twice. She did not answer. He emailed. She replied once. All further transaction communication should go through counsel. 3 days later, Langford Capital sent a revised proposal. Higher price. Stronger employee protections. No closures for 30 months. Claire rejected it. A week later, Victor requested a private meeting. She agreed. Not at Meridian House. At Donovan's small corporate office above a bakery in Cambridge. No dark wood. No private dining room. No servers. Victor arrived alone. Claire wore a navy suit. He looked at her for a long moment. You clean up differently when you're not carrying wine, Claire said. And you speak differently when you need something. Victor almost smiled, then sat. I owe you an apology. Yes. He paused. That's it? What would you like? I don't know. Then keep going. Victor looked at the table. I was dismissive. Yes. I spoke to you in a way I should not have. Yes. He looked up. And I underestimated you. Claire shook her head. That's the part you still don't understand. Victor frowned. You didn't underestimate me because I hid ownership. He waited. You underestimated me because I was serving you. Silence. If I had actually been only a waitress, your behavior would still have been wrong. Victor looked away. Claire continued. The reveal makes a good story. She tapped the table. But it should not be required for basic respect. Victor said nothing. Then he asked, is there any version of this deal you would approve? Claire thought about it. No. Because of me? Partly. That's expensive. So is bad stewardship. Victor leaned back. You really believe you can run this company better? I'm not running it. Then who is? The people already doing it. Victor laughed quietly. You're romanticizing management. No. She slid a folder toward him. Same-store revenue up 6%. Turnover down 11. Training completion 94. Guest retention up. Victor looked at the numbers. Claire continued. The company has problems. Every company does. Yes. That's why firms like mine exist. Sometimes. He looked at her. What does that mean? Sometimes you fix problems. She paused. Sometimes you buy healthy things and call the surgery a rescue. Victor stared. For the first time since she met him, he had no immediate answer. Langford Capital withdrew its offer 5 days later. Officially, the party cited inability to reach agreement on governance and post-close operating strategy. Unofficially, everyone in the market knew something had gone wrong. Not enough to embarrass Victor publicly. Enough to make lenders ask more questions. The base case closure memo triggered an internal review at Langford. Several deal team members had used different assumptions for different audiences. Investors saw one plan, management saw another, lenders saw a third. None were completely false. Together they were misleading. Langford Capital's investment committee changed its internal disclosure procedures. Victor lost leadership of 2 pending hospitality acquisitions. Not because he insulted Claire. Because the failed Donovan transaction exposed a pattern of overly aggressive deal positioning that the committee no longer wanted attached to a fragile market. He remained wealthy. He remained powerful. But power became narrower. That was enough. At Donovan Hospitality, the board expected Claire to return as chair. She refused. They asked her to become executive chair. She refused that too. Grant Mercer asked why. They were sitting in the empty Meridian house at 10 in the morning. Chairs upside down on several tables, sunlight across the floor. Claire wore jeans and a sweater. Because the company doesn't need another person at the top. Grant frowned. It needs governance. Yes, you are governance. Then I'll govern. From where? She looked around the restaurant. Everywhere. Grant laughed. She did not. Instead, Claire proposed 3 changes. First, employee profit participation became protected by board policy and could not be removed without a supermajority vote. Second, every acquisition proposal had to include a workforce impact statement. Third, the stewardship covenant would be amended so that any future control transaction required a formal employee advisory review before consent. Grant thought the third proposal was excessive. Claire told him that was why she liked it. The board approved all 3. Then she did something nobody expected. She kept working occasional shifts. Not secretly anymore. That was impossible. The story had spread through the company. Servers knew. Managers knew. Dishwashers knew. Over time, the novelty faded. That was what Claire wanted. 6 months later, one of the restaurants faced a real closure decision. Not hypothetical. The Portland location had been losing money for 3 years. Victor had been right about that. Sentiment could become expensive. Claire went to Portland. She worked 2 nights, talked to staff, reviewed leases, met local customers, read the numbers. The conclusion was uncomfortable. The location could not continue as it was. The old Claire might have protected it because Daniel loved it. The new Claire understood something else. Stewardship was not preservation at any cost. It was responsibility. The company restructured the location. Smaller footprint, new lease, reduced menu, no layoffs. The restaurant became profitable 8 months later. Claire kept 1 page from the Langford contract in her desk. Section 6.4. The benefits restructuring clause. Not because she was angry, because it reminded her how close the company had come to giving away decisions it did not understand. A year after the dinner, Meridian House hosted another private event. This one was for new restaurant managers. Claire stood at the back in a black vest, no apron, just watching. A young manager named Sofia Martinez gave a presentation on staff retention. She was 29. Former server, now general manager. At the end, someone asked how the company had kept turnover low while competitors struggled. Sofia answered, "We try to make sure the person carrying plates can still tell the person carrying the spreadsheet when something is wrong." Claire smiled. Daniel would have liked that. After the session, Sofia found her. You know everyone watches you when you stand in the back. Claire looked around. They should stop. They won't. Then I need a better hiding place. Sophia laughed, then became serious. Can I ask something? Yes. Did you know you were going to reject Langford before the dinner? Claire thought about it. Almost. What would have changed your mind? Evidence. Of what? That they respected the company when they thought no one important was looking. Sophia nodded. And they failed. Yes. Claire looked toward the dining room. Most people reveal themselves when they think hierarchy protects them. That was the part of the story everyone remembered. The millionaire had sneered. You're just a waitress. Then she opened the contract. Then the room learned she held the one signature the deal could not survive without. It sounded like revenge. It was not. Claire did not destroy Victor because he insulted her. She did not reject $180 million to teach a rude man manners. She rejected the deal because the insult confirmed what the documents already suggested. Langford Capital saw workers as costs to optimize, restaurants as units, history as inefficiency, promises as flexible, and control as permission to rewrite terms after leverage disappeared. Victor's mistake was not failing to recognize Claire Donovan. His mistake was believing Claire Bennett did not deserve to be recognized at all. There was a difference. A year later, Claire was carrying 2 plates through Meridian House when a young investor stopped her. He was 26, new to the company. He had heard the story. Everyone had. He looked at the plates, then at her. Should I take those? Claire frowned. Why? He stopped. Claire waited. He smiled awkwardly. Never mind. Good answer. She placed the plates on a table. At the far end of the dining room, a server dropped a fork. A bartender called for ice. A chef asked for a runner. Someone laughed in the kitchen. The restaurant moved. No one stood when Claire entered. No one needed to. She had spent years learning that authority was most dangerous when it demanded visible proof. Titles, cars, names, chairs. The best kind of authority did something else. It protected the conditions that allowed other people to do good work. Daniel had understood that before she did. If we ever get big enough for people to stop seeing the waiter, we're already too big. Claire had once thought he was talking about hospitality. He had been talking about power. Victor Langford looked at a woman carrying wine and saw someone beneath the negotiation. Then she opened a folder. The contract changed the room. But the contract was never the lesson. The lesson was what he had said before he knew she could stop him. That was the version of Victor she trusted. Not the apology, not the revised offer, not the higher price. The version who believed no consequence was coming. Claire learned to judge people there. In the seconds before they discover who has power. That was where character lived. And that night, in a private dining room filled with money, lawyers and men who believed ownership belonged to whoever wrote the largest check, a waitress opened a contract and reminded them that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone has already decided not to see.